I know that you want to be able to talk to your partner without it ending up in an all-out battle. That you want to be able to raise issues in your relationship and be able to come up with solutions together. What you don't want is days of silence and a ton of unresolved issues in your relationship. In this video, I'm going to give you the information to break down the cycle of bickering that is destroying your relationship and to reintroduce calm communication where you both feel heard and understood. The exact same information that I have shared in the last decade with hundreds of couples in my therapy room. Let me tell you a little story, and please bear with me because at the start of the story, I'm going to sound like a terrible therapist. Bill and Sally are sitting in my therapy room, and I ask them a question that I often ask couples when they come to see me. Can you give me an example of a recent conflict that you've had? Well, says Bill, there are hundreds of examples of those, but let me start with the one that we had just before we came in here. I was telling Sally that I did not want to be here. I just wanted to be home on the couch, and Sally immediately tells me that I am the worst husband in the world. And then Sally pipes in and says, that's not what I told you. I actually said you were a jerk. And then Bill says, see, this is the crap that I have to put up with. She always criticizes me. I don't even know why we're here, because if I'm such a terrible person, what's the point? And then Sally chips in and says, you know what? This is what he always does, is makes me out to be the bad guy. And Bill chimes in with, well, let's face it, you're no angel. You get the picture. So before you think I'm a terrible therapist, this is the point where I jump in and I ask them if this is what conflict normally looks like when they're at home. And they both answer yes. Only Sally chips in with, this is him actually on his best behavior. And Bill chips in with, she is so much meaner when we are at home. And then I'll say something to them like, okay, so I let you guys go there for a moment because I just wanted to understand what conflict looks like in your relationship. Because right now we're in a process of assessment. So I am trying to understand these patterns of reactivity that you experience outside the therapy room. But once we start therapy, whenever this pattern of reactivity emerges in the relationship, I'm going to interject and help you break the pattern. So Bill and Sally are not a real couple, but this example I'm giving is based on a pattern of interaction that I see in most couples who come to therapy. So if this sounds somewhat familiar to you, you are not alone. Most couples will experience some moments of reactivity in their relationship. But here's the thing, that constant bickering is like low intensity chronic warfare on your relationship. When you're bickering, basically what happens is that every time one person says something, the other person reacts to it. And this state of reactivity is not only not great for your relationship, but it also has a negative impacts on you as an individual. So why do we stay in this reactive communication even though it doesn't feel good and we probably even understand that it's not great for our relationship or for us? My experience in years of doing therapy is that until people understand the physiological element of what happens when we're in this state of reactivity and why we can't have effective communication whilst we are in this state, it's really difficult to become unstuck. But the good news is, once you can really understand what is happening in this reactive communication, it helps you to take the steps needed to have calm, effective communication. When we go into this state of physiological arousal, which I'll talk about more in a moment, we trigger off a fight, flight, freeze response. So usually what happens is one partner is in that fight mode. If you're in fight mode in a relationship, what it can look like is this overriding need for your partner to hear and understand you. So you kind of just keep coming at it from 20 different directions, trying to explain to them the depth of your pain in a way that they can understand. And I totally get that because we all want to feel understood by our partner. We all have moments in our relationships where we need that reassurance or those cues from our partner that they care. But here's the thing, when you're in that fight mode or in that state of physiological arousal, it's very difficult to communicate in a way that your partner can really understand your perspective and your needs. And it's highly unlikely that they will be able to give you the understanding and the comfort that you need in that moment. Let me explain why this is the case and what is happening in your relationship from a physiological perspective. When couples understand this opens the pathway to be able to implement the strategies that they need to have calm, effective communication. And here's why. Because when you're in that state of reactivity, this is actually an outward sign of an internal process. So what is happening in this moment is that you're in a state of physiological arousal. When you're in that state of fight, flight, freeze, your body releases cortisol and adrenaline, and also undergoes a number of physiological shifts. So one of the things that happens that's really important to understand in a relational context is that the front part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, isn't operating at its optimum. For example, your ability to rationalize is compromised. So of course, we want to be able to communicate our emotions, but we also need our rational mind. So sometimes we talk about the idea of our emotional mind and our rational mind. And when we have both of those in balance, we are able to communicate from what we call wise mind. So bringing both the emotion and the rational thought together. When we're in that state of physiological arousal, we are highly reactive and we aren't able to rationalize in the same way. Another key thing that happens is that because this state of physiological arousal is designed to protect us, we're actually scanning the environment for dangers. So what this means in the relational context is that we are literally looking for the negative. So we're looking for the things that confirm the negative thoughts that we might have, or it may be that we're looking for the negatives in our relationship or in our partner. And let me be real, of course, there are imperfections in every relationship. And if you look for them, you will find them, particularly when you're in this heightened state of arousal. And another key thing, which may not seem super important, is that you lose your sense of humor. And humor is a really important tool for effective communication. There are also a number of other changes that occur from a physiological perspective. And these may look a little different for each person, each partner in the relationship. It may be things like your heart rate goes up, you start to feel dizzy or lightheaded. There are a range of bodily sensations that may happen in that moment for you. So here's the thing. When you're in that state of physiological arousal, you are unable to communicate effectively. It's just impossible. So firstly, the way that you communicate to your partner changes. So the information that's being given is given in a way that isn't easy to process and take on because it may be loaded, for example, with criticism or defensiveness. And then equally, it's difficult to process that information. So it's really impossible to have good, effective communication where we can hear each other and take on each other's needs and compromise to develop those win-win solutions. This may sound a little extreme, stopping the communication every time reactivity creeps in. Because when we're in that state of reactivity, this is when we do the most damage to our relationship. We say hurtful things to each other because we are hurting. So what we need to do every time is to be able to stop the interaction and to regulate. So the key here is really firstly to be able to recognize whenever you are in reactive communication. And secondly, to understand the importance of stopping communication in that moment. Knowing that you're in that state of physiological arousal and effective communication simply isn't possible. And then thirdly, to be able to regulate so you can communicate effectively. Often what I'll find, particularly with couples at the start, is that you do need to take a break to regulate. I know this is easier said than done, and a lot of couples will tell me that they have tried this in their relationships, but it hasn't worked. The reason is there is a clear blueprint that you need to use to take an effective break. If you want that roadmap to de-escalate conflict in your relationship, then hit the link below.